As part of the 2025 Gateways Music Festival, Black musicians from across the country will come together for a performance featuring the nonet of Afro-British composer Samuel Coleridge Taylor. This performance will take place on Wednesday, October 15th, 2025, at the Eastman School of Music's Hatch Recital Hall at 7:30 p.m. The following evening, seven-time Grammy winner Terrence Blanchard will join the Gateways Festival Orchestra for a program titled Film Scores Live. Learn more and grab your tickets at gatewaysmusicfestival.org. I'm Loki Karuna, and this is TRILLOQUY. Welcome back. It's been a while. Appreciate your tuning in to the podcast built to decolonize classical music. If you've been keeping up with me on social media or otherwise, maybe in real life, hopefully you can understand why TRILLOQUY has had such a significant hiatus. Since TRILLOQUY's last opus back in the early part of the summer, I've become the sole executive director of the American Composers Forum, which I'll speak to more in today's TRILLOQUY. But for now, I want to hop right into today's conversation, one that I've been waiting for since I started this show back in 2019. 2024 Grammy winner and three-time Grammy nominee bassoonist Monica Ellis is a founding member of the wind quintet Imani Winds, who for over a quarter century has dazzled audiences with their dynamic playing, adventurous programming, and commitment to outreach, new works, and collaborations. As longtime listeners to this show know, Monica was the first bassoonist I saw when I was handed a bassoon back in 1999 after a quick, maybe Yahoo search. I don't know, back in those days. So she's been in my periphery since I started in music, and it was an absolute honor to get a chance to sit down and speak with her a couple weeks ago. She's a part of this week's activities with the Gateways Music Festival. So we talk about that. We talk about her intro to the bassoon and what she's looking forward to as she continues as the lone founding member of Imani Winds, currently in the ensemble. This conversation is one of about 10 dialogues that I have in my backlog, so I'm thrilled to come back to you with this one today. So to get us into my chat with Monica, obviously, I'm going to share some Imani Winds. So here's the tail end of the Imani Winds recording that served as my introduction to this group almost 30 years ago, their take on the Libertango of composer Astor Piazzolla. Thanks again for tuning in and coming back to the show. More from me on the other side.
But I did always know that music would be my life. I did always know that it was never a side thing. It was never, let me do something else in case I need to fall back on that, and because music won't work out. So I always knew being a performer in some capacity would be what my life's work would be. But the most famous bassoonist. Thank you for the question, Loki, but I'm going to push back. I don't know about all that, but no, I mean, I honestly, thank you for that. And it is very cool to see that the work that I've done and the way I play, all of that, all that encompasses my musical output has been recognized after, now some 20, going on 30 years, really. Being in this music business, I am proud of that, but I don't really think about it that much.
Well, something that I think about is the fact that you've not only demonstrated musical excellence in classical music, Western classical music, and beyond, but over the years, you've done so while celebrating Blackness and not just of the music, but of your aesthetic, who you are. These days, I would say being very Afrocentric and consciously Black is in vogue, something more people are awakened to. But I imagine when you were getting started initially, that really wasn't the case, certainly not in classical music. I wonder what that journey has been like.
Right, right. Yeah. Well, it was not necessarily like you said as much in vogue. However, it was our Blackness, and I say our because I'm just thinking about my family. I'm thinking about my sister, my mom, my dad. We were always in this space of being unapologetically Black. Like we didn't wear kente cloth every day and have like we didn't know about Kwanzaa growing up, that's for sure, things like that. But there was definitely this, yes, this is who we are. I mean, we went to a Black church, a little small community church in the Hill District. We knew we grew up in the Hill District of Pittsburgh, which is a historically Black neighborhood. All the history of jazz, the history of the Great Migration. I mean, I would learn about these things almost later, as a budding adults, going into college. The fact that I went to Oberlin is such a gift that I continue to talk about and continue to be excited about. Graduating 30 years ago, but 32 years ago. But I know what I experienced there. I was able to quantify the feelings that I had, or the education that I had growing up just as a kid, coming up to Pittsburgh high school, all middle school, high school, etc. But being in a really liberally minded and an educational mind, like this, just in this space where people appreciated knowledge, whether that was on the instrument as a musician or otherwise, I think that allowed for me to just be my best self. So, learning about even more of the history of our people and all of the things manifested itself in college for sure. And then, by the time I got here to New York to go to grad school at Juilliard, it was like off to the races. I was like, oh yeah, well, we're going to be blackety black. That's just what we do. Mm-hmm. But yeah, growing up, we didn't particularly have, a Black experience per se. Went to a really mixed high school and middle school. Had plenty of white friends, plenty of Black friends. But again, it was just the culture was kind of understood, if you will. My dad was a jazz musician. My mom she was a stay-at-home mom for many years. Then she had some part-time jobs, and then had started her career once we were in high school, more or less, working for the Allegheny County Bar Association. So, she had to be around a lot of white folks and deal with that. So, but we was watching the Cosby Show. We was watching, Cheers growing up and just being us that, and never had to necessarily, thankfully, explain ourselves. My mom, God bless her, I keep talking about her so much. She'll be 89 in November, right? Wow. And so, she grew up in Pittsburgh, but also raised by her paternal grandmother. So her mother, though, is in North Carolina. And so, just really quick story, like she would actually visit her mom. And we're talking like, the 1940s, 1950s. She couldn't really, her mom didn't have the wherewithal to have the two older kids with her because she had some younger siblings that her mom had to take care of, that the family had to take care of. So my mother knew what it was like firsthand to experience just blatant Jim Crow racism, like right there. When you're 80 plus years old and you still alive, you've seen something.
Oh yeah.
But she grew up in the North, though, so she had the experience of it kind of as a byproduct of Southern living, but always grew up in the North and didn't really know that world so innately. And anyway, yeah, I've rambled on enough. But yeah, it's being Black, being celebrating our culture. It didn't just start with Imani Winds. It didn't start when I came here. But I was primed for such a journey when I did get here, and things did start this way. And I met somebody named Valerie Coleman, who ultimately changed the trajectory of my life.
Oh, yes, of course. And that even that word Imani is one that many people learned. Like y'all opened up the door for so many folks. With that,
Yeah.
with Imani Winds acknowledged, I always say to myself, if I interview, Kelly Rowland, if I interview Michelle Williams, I can't talk about Beyonce, and and a part of me feels that way every time I talk to current or former members of Imani Winds. It is such a huge part of your identity, but you'll be featured at the Gateways Music Festival as Monica Ellis, the bassoonist. I wonder how you've balanced those two identities over your career so far.
Yeah. Thank you for asking. I mean, I don't mind it being at the forefront of my of someone talking about me. It has absolutely been my life's work. It's been an honor. It's been a pleasure to be in the bassoon chair, but in the administrative positions that I've been in all these years. It's been, so I have. It's been a twofold trajectory, a twofold journey, I think. And really all five of us brought ourselves to the group, and the group brought itself to us. Now the group wasn't created, so science project, like we had to create the group, but then the group becomes its own thing. It literally, bubbles up and bubbles over and becomes its own thing, and to the point where we're fairly early on, we called it the sixth member. The group was the sixth member, and is the sixth member. There's the five of us, but then it's what we created, that it's another member that has to be cultivated, has to be nurtured, has to have its own, has its own identity. But at the same time, the rest of us are our individual selves as well. So it was simultaneously the sum of all parts and the individual. And so when people started to leave and other new members came on board, we had this identity that they could just come into and be a part of it. Still with the same concept, though, of bringing their own individual selves to this existing entity, this existing glob being that we created. But it's because we're so specific individuals that makes and continues to make Imani Winds, I think, such an incredible force. So to your question, yeah, I love doing the more solo stuff, for separate chamber music that isn't with my usual suspects. And because it's Imani comes with me. It's my partner right here. So but I think what has been so wonderful is that all along, all of us have been able to have these individual paths as well. That has done nothing but feed into the group. Of course, we're very busy with the group, but still there's time to allow for solo projects or recording projects that are outside of the group. And to this day, I mean, every last one of us, and even Makai is the new person on board. But Mark, for sure, he comes to mind pretty immediately. He has his hands in 3, 4, 5 other different projects. Not to mention the teaching that he does. He just played at Madison Square Garden with Wolfpack, which is one of the seminal rock bands out there, and he plays with them all the time. Y Music, he's a part of Manhattan Chamber Players. So and so for him to be able to do those things just makes Imani Winds that much more prominent, I think. So it's a double whammy that I love to share. I don't mind.
Wonderful. Well, I do want to get into your background a little bit, but first, I just wanted your opinion on Black engagement with the bassoon. So as you know, I'm from Memphis, so you're never going to be the only Black person in any room down there, including rooms with bassoons in them. My first teacher, Loki, was a Black man. Right. But that reality, as my career developed, was one that I saw in different geographies. The bassoon is not an instrument foreign to Black folks somehow. I have my own theories, but have you ever thought about that? What do you think about the fact that so many Black folks play this instrument?
Yeah. And when I saw you ask that, list that question, I'll admit it's not really something that I've thought of. In fact, I think the opposite is probably the narrative that isn't that correct, to your
Hmm.
very point, that that it is a more obscure instrument. Classical music, period. Black folks aren't as the numbers aren't there. It's not a prominent field that we go into, and therefore, just by process of the trickle down, we're not a part of, we don't have the big numbers firstly, and then you trickle down to an instrument like the bassoon. So in theory, the numbers aren't there for us. But you're right in that that's not really true. That's not really the narratives. Now, me growing up with it, I definitely didn't see no other Black people playing the bassoon. That wasn't the case. It didn't occur to me that I was doing something particularly revolutionary as a Black woman playing the bassoon. It's when other people have said this to me that I'm like, oh yeah, I suppose you're right. But that goes, I mean, and we'll talk about it as you just said. That goes into my background and just how I was raised and the confidence that my parents instilled in me. But there could be something, now that you're asking the question about it. This idea that the instrument is we're already the other, and then this instrument is the other. So I do wonder if there is something to this a concept of already being marginalized and wanting to connect with something else that's relatively marginalized, to find your own voice. I haven't tried to figure out this theory. I haven't I don't know that if it's true or not, but that we do have some pretty decent numbers amongst Black women and men, on both sides of it, that are playing the bassoon, does lead me to think that, yeah, we're already being kind of pigeonholed into, well, if you're Black and you're a musician, you must play jazz. Oh, you probably, if I get that one more time. And people already think I'm Cassandra Wilson, which, by the way, I don't mind being mistaken for her. I totally don't mind it. But so there's already this stigma that you can't play classical, you can't possibly play classical music as a Black person anyway. Number one, but yeah, and then number two, perhaps because we are kind of faced with that stigma, folks be like, you know what, I'm going to pick the most obscure instrument that there is, and see what I can do with that. See how I can thrive in that. At the same time, though, I think it just might be an anomaly, because I don't know that a lot of us have started with the bassoon. Just our Black girl, Black boy magic has risen to the top, and we're those kids that are talented in band, and the band teachers kind of see something and say, why don't you try something different? I feel like every kid has a journey and y'all talk about that too, that starts with a great influence, a great teacher, whoever that might be, Black, white, whatever, that sees something in that kid and says, okay, maybe you should try something a little more challenging, a little more, not even interesting, but more different. You never know. Then one other thing, at least for my story, is that teachers said, this can take you far. This you can get a scholarship on this instrument. You can go to college with this instrument. So if you had some good teachers that believed in you and thought, okay, even if and their intentions are good, hey, if your parents don't have that much money, you're going to need to find scholarship to go to school to continue on. Even if you don't become a professional at it, this can really make a difference for you. I'm certain that there's some correlation between financial aid and playing the bassoon.
That's a part of my theory.
I mean, right? Yeah. So again, I rambled, but yeah, it's an interesting topic, and like that, we could have our own conference in and of itself. We got plenty of all the, between Gateways and Sphinx and Bond, all of the various networks that are now prevalent. Yeah, there should be like a Black bassoon conference in and of itself.
I love that idea.
We just did it. Boom, there you go. It's happening.
So what do you remember about that first time opening the case? What are your earliest memories of the bassoon?
And I do remember it, believe it or not. No, I absolutely, I've, it's kind of embedded in here. I'm in my living room. I've bought the case home because again, this teacher has my eighth grade band teacher, Mr. Powell, Arthur Powell. He said, give this a shot. I'm playing saxophone. I'm playing piano. I'm playing clarinet. You're playing these other instruments, Monica. You should try something else. And it was one of the big square boxes, not nothing fancy in terms of cases. And he was not. He was a oh, man. What did he play? I want to see. He was a like a guitar, bass and guitar like play. So he didn't play. He didn't play the bassoon. That's for sure. But I had a fingering chart, and I just kind of opened the thing up, and my parents had no idea what was going on. I mean, they knew the instrument. My dad being a musician, but didn't know what to do with it. And yeah, like those early days with it, I think I was just fascinated. It was a little, it was quirky, but I wasn't like so attached to it. It didn't hit me until a little bit later. But there was something about just that. I mean, the initial,
Yeah.
like the box opens and gold light, like from Pulp Fiction, shines out.
Mm-hmm.
There was something. There was definitely something there. But I was doing so much other stuff as a kid, and almost high school or eighth grade, ninth grade, playing between piano and saxophone. I was playing these other instruments really quite prominently. That the bassoon sort of came now almost secondary and third. So I was it came along for the ride. It wasn't the only thing. In fact, piano, I was a very serious pianist. I thought that piano would be what I would do. I mean, all the way through high school, I took, serious piano lessons. My French piano teacher, Mrs. Colette Wilkins. And so, it was for real, for real. And then, in fact, when I told her that I was not going to go into the piano or, like study piano, she was quite affected, like quite hurt, like, oh, okay. So anyway, though, it was a part of a large spectrum of musical outlets that I had. Piano, again, with piano, I was playing in our church choir. I was playing at our annual, at my high school, we had these epic musicals, spring musicals. I was MD in the musicals and, like teaching choir parts and like in the pit playing piano and conducting the choir and stuff like that. And then on Saturdays, I would go to youth orchestra. And that honestly is what ultimately got me jazzed up about the bassoon. The act of being in an orchestra is what the bassoon allowed me. So at the beginning, it could have been almost any instrument. I could have, if somebody had handed me a ukulele and said, you can play in an orchestra, then I'm like, okay, I'm going to play the ukulele. So it was this power of many people making this one thing that got me really, really excited. And the vehicle for that was the bassoon. So yeah, I said, sign me up if that's what it is. If that's how I can do this thing, this orchestra thing through the bassoon, then yes. And ironically, my entire career has been a chamber music musician, but I do think the sound of the orchestra, that being my initial experience with the bassoon, it has to this day. I do believe that there's a correlation with how I play and the sound in which I want to have the bigness of the sound and the a feeling of orchestral unity has led to how I approach chamber music and how I approach playing the bassoon.
And your trajectory really speaks for itself, but I'm sure there was some hard times along the way. I mentioned Loki earlier. Among the many things he taught me was that in every musician's life, there's a day when they walk into a practice room as a student and walk out the practice room as a musician. For me, what that looked like was my first big audition when I was literally practicing 16 hours a day, every single day for a month. That's just, I wasn't eating hardly. I was practicing. I was really beating it down. And that's for me, in my memory, the big thing that opened up the door for where my career went. I wonder what that looks like for you. What was the beating the block, just, putting in the work for you along the way?
Yeah, Well, I was fortunate to have just a pretty, you know, a wonderful experience in college. And so I think what you're getting at probably came when Imani Winds almost already started, when we were in the beginning phases of it, and people taking us seriously. And not to
Mm.
say that they didn't think that there was potential, they didn't think that this could be something, but there were a ton of naysayers that thought, you're rough around the edges. We would get, what are you really trying to do here? Oh, you mean you don't play Donzi? You're not playing, like Rika. You're gonna just play this kind of new stuff that somebody wrote for you, commissioning. It's so us overcoming, again, if we didn't have the instruments in our hand, it must be a group of singers. So just overcoming the novel notions of like, what, that these five black and brown kids could be a wind quintet. That's probably been the most challenging thing, that we had to just keep our nose to the, what's the phrase? Like, well, I forget, like, just keep your head down, and
Mm-hmm.
and stay in the shed, like you're saying, just keep at the work of it all, whatever that would entail, to then not even prove that we could do it, but just show that we are worthy of this space just as much as anybody else. I think we all came, fortunately, we came to the group with a good foundation of our individual selves. Of course, Valerie being the visionary that she was and continues to be to this day in so many ways, allow for us to dream big. She was always a dreamer, even with her own challenges and obstacles that she had to overcome. Being a Black woman growing up in Louisville, Kentucky, wanting to be a composer and a flutist, and showing that she could do those things. So everybody's own individual stories coming to the table, and again, this goulash, this gumbo, why
Mm-hmm.
not goulash? This gumbo um, of experiences just feeding into each other. We were able to be each other's rocks in a way, so that then when one person did kind of have that challenge feeling, or like this is just not working out, then the other person was sort of lifted up. So yeah, when we would be like, okay, well, we didn't win that competition, or we didn't get that job that we thought we would get. Okay, well, let's just create another opportunity. Let's just figure it out. So the safety in numbers of a chamber music group, period, as well as us being so connected and the chemistry being so major, I think allowed for us to overcome any kind of challenges that we did face or that we would have faced. So we were really fortunate. I mean, at the end of the day, it was luck. It was that whole thing, preparation meets opportunity and all of that. That's true. That is true. But I mean, for 17 years, it was all the same people. So it's more than just the preparation. I mean, it's some divine intervention, luck that was involved with the whole thing as well.
And for folks who aren't old enough to know or remember, Imani Winds in its first iteration was very femme forward, which I also think back as being revolutionary, to use that word, at the time, certainly.
Yeah, it was. And I have to have people tell me that to know it. And I'm not trying to be coy. I really am not. But yeah, I guess because I've just been around powerful women of color, Black women for so long, it felt like the norm for me. I'm like, this is how everybody is, right? They're like, no, this is not how everybody is. Like, oh, okay. But yes, I mean that the vision, vision, yes, but the image, or there's the word, the image of the four of us, and even Jeff. I mean, we do get the femme forward conversation a lot, but even Jeff in his beautiful Blackness. I mean, just and Jeff is my heart, my dear heart of hearts best friend. Him being with us, like the five of us. I do have to sometimes step back and just kind of see. I have to encapsulate. I have to just close my eyes and think about, yeah, that had to look wild to most people, especially white folks in the establishment that are not used to a group or Black people being in that type of confident space. It had to look like something else, it really did. And so I do recognize that, even though, again, people have to kind of tell me that it looked that way, because I think we were so in the shed of it all. Again, we were just so ensconced in how can we continue to do this better, that we weren't looking at the outside looking in so much. And I think that was a good thing for us. I think more people should not worry about or think about what is being looked at, how you're being looked at, and just stay true to what you're doing, and stay the course. But at the same time, every now and then, yes, of course, you have to say, okay, well, what's looking? And then we got publicists for that. We had agents to kind of to help us along the way, and trusted advisors to say, okay, why don't you think about it this way? Why don't you look at this program or this kind of piece? But still, the buck stopped with us, which was always very empowering, just what's another word for empowering? It was the type, we got the type of feeling of we can kind of do it all. We can conquer it all, because of that confidence that we had in each other and in ourselves.
So talk a little bit about your history with Gateways. This certainly isn't your first go round with Gateways. When did you first hear about this organization, and when did you start playing with the organization?
Yeah. Gateways was always well, I'll start with here. The first time I did anything was 2019. So, obviously like right before the pandemic as well. But before that, for years, it was something that I always knew about. Everybody knew Gateways. It was in the summertime. Folks were going up for the couple of days of the orchestra. It happened every other year, I believe, in those days. So yeah, it was always Marshall Seeley comes to mind, horn player, New York staple, of course. And in fact, he played with Imani Winds in the very beginning, very, very, very beginning. Little known fact. He technically was the first horn player for about 6 months.
Okay.
And he said, this is not so much for me. Let me introduce you to somebody else. And he told us about Jeff Scott and introduced us to Jeff. And he thought maybe this might be a little bit better fit for you all. He's a little bit older, was doing more gigs than us. And we was just trying to like be in the practice room forever and ever and ever. And he's like, nah, I need to go work. So actually, I owe a lot to Marshall. We owe a lot to Marshall. But anyway, and even now, Kevin Newton, our, of course, president horn player, is very good friends with Marshall, and he's one of his confidants and all. But I think about Marshall, like he came to Gateways just as an example. Like he was one of the guys that I knew that was coming from New York and going up to Gateways, and so yeah, it was always one of these things that was there, and Black people doing it, and it was during the summer though. So it was often something that I couldn't do because we Imani Winds sort of had our own activities and own summer festivals we were doing, our own festival. So like the timing never really worked out. So when it was when in 2019 when I was asked to come up and do it, it was such a pleasure. Such just. Talk about empowering again, just to have us all in this space was very, very powerful. Josh Hood, of course, he was doing the pursuing section then, and he's my buddy from way back, and so just to be in that space was incredibly amazing. I was able to connect with people that I hadn't seen in forever, and that is one of the things about obviously I'm incredibly grateful for Imani Winds, but not being as much on the freelance scene, at least in New York, you kind of miss out on seeing people and connecting with people. And so the social aspect of it, of it just, was so exciting. Regardless of the social aspect, like socially, and then the social impact of right. it. it's the philosophy of it. It's all just intertwined in all of it. And I don't even know that I had the language to know the importance of it, to be totally honest. Like, I knew it as an important thing for us as Black classical musicians, but before I was there and experienced it for myself, the joy that is in Black people playing this so-called classical music, as we say, and in this genre, but the joy that we exhibit whatever space we're in is the special sauce. Like, it's one of our superpowers, I believe, because we can have this joy while overcoming so much historically, ancestrally, presently. The joy is what we continue to literally, that guides our steps. And so it's so palpable, so powerful. And then not just the joy of being in each other's space and company, but the joy of excellence. There's never a moment where we're settling for mediocrity, or just saying, yeah, we'll let that slide. Like, that is not the case. And of course, racist history shows that we do have that propensity to not be excellent, or to just settle, and that's the racist tropes that we've been challenging for eons, right? Jim Crow, what am I thinking? Like, Step and Fetch It. Like, what was that? The blackface stuff, like that. We're just those tropes to continue to this day. Unfortunately, that we are the type of people that are irresponsible or not ready to rise to the occasion. So anyway, having this type of space was extremely powerful. So how did I? Right. So I've gone all around the horn as usual. So yeah, being a part of it in the way that I was able to be a part of it in 2019 was super exciting. And then, just seeing my good friend Lee, we've known each other for many years. We're OBs, we're Oberlin grads. He still has an apartment around the corner from me. I'm pointing like, right? Like, we both live in Harlem. We're literally like neighbors. We're Harlemites. And so to see his leadership take it to this next level, really, I think was powerful in and of itself as well. That he saw the future of it, and he saw what needed to happen to raise the notoriety of it, raise the people, how people are looking at it, raise the artistic level of it as well, which I think needed to happen for sure. And those were likely difficult questions and changes to make, because we are so this is a close to our heart sort of thing, so we don't want to offend our own people, but we do have to examine when the level of excellence is not as high as it could be. So I think those were the growing pains that had to happen. And so to see it where it is today, under, of course, Alex's leadership, is just marvelous. And it warms my heart. And to just, it's just an amazing organization, mission wise and execution, and what's happening with it these days is really, really quite something.
One of the most novel things for me about your involvement in the Gateways Music Festival is seeing you engage this, as you said, the so-called classical music, the quote unquote traditional canon. So Gateways does obviously, support Black composition and new music, but it's a space where Black folks are also gathering around that Western European canon, including the music of Samuel Coleridge Taylor, as you'll be performing. I wonder, what's your sort of approach or preparation like? Is it different engaging music by Samuel Coleridge Taylor as opposed to the many new experimental, groundbreaking works that you've spent so much of your career focused on? I wonder if you can speak to that.
Right. Well, I think it's important to note that the foundation that we have, that one should have, regardless of what your culture is, what your race is, what your ethnic background is, there's a certain level of a certain foundation that you have to have that is expected to be at any high level experience, like high level environment. And so, for yeah, are you practicing your scales and your arpeggios and playing in tune and playing with the metronome and Samuel Coulter Taylor, Brahms, Tanya Leon, whomever it is? If you're not doing that, then you need to go do that. And if you have this if one has this notion of, because I'm a Black musician, that there's, I'm just soulful, I'm I just play, what the spirit moves me. No, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't. You need you need to go make some reads is what you need to go do,
right.
to come back to our big world. So right. Yeah, the preparation to your point, is very similar from one genre of music to another. I think from that is as wide as romantic period music, classical period, whatever it may be, to today's pieces by Carlos Simon. I'm thinking because that's how I was introduced to Carlos Simon, was in 2019 when we played his orchestral piece. Or to the music of Tanya Leon. And I'm mentioning that because I'm going to play her piece that she wrote for me for bassoon and piano. And it's very complicated. Like, there's no way that I couldn't come to that without very specific study of with the metronome and it has its own voice to it, but still. So yeah, I think there's a misnomer that people of color that play different styles of music may not have to have a foundation in the so-called classical genre that is your typical, again, scales, arpeggios, the knowledge of the instrument, and we talk about this with jazz too. Jazz musicians are so much more accomplished than most classical musicians.
Exactly.
I mean, they practice so much harder than we do. Like, it's not even funny, just to mostly to train the ear that we don't do as much. And it's something that I'm always trying to strive for, but know that the type of work that most jazz musicians put in, from transcribing solos to having just the ability to improvise on the drop of a dime. These are things that takes a tremendous amount of foundational prowess of the knowledge of the instrument, regardless of what color you are or what background you come from. So, we always have to remember that in this conversation about Black people and our experience with this Western music, we still must have that level of foundation excellence in order to execute other styles. So, the piece that Tanya wrote, for instance, it has a lot of blues influence and a lot of blue notes, if you will. And so what I try to bring is the aesthetic of the blues to that piece, but not the other way around necessarily. Not, I couldn't just be like, okay, I'm going to play it real bluesy and real soulful, and then that's that. No, she wrote very specific notes that I need to play, that I need to execute, that I need to coordinate with the pianist, etc. So, there's no half step in it. Like, you can cross over into other genres within the classical music wide scope, but still has to have that firm foundation.
So just as with every Gateway's presentation performance, there are Black folks, Black audience members who come because they've never or rarely see Black folks doing this thing that the Gateway's Music Festival platforms. Along with that, I think a lot about the opportunity to teach Black people about not only our current involvement in classical music, but our historic involvement in classical music as it relates to this upcoming festival. I'm specifically thinking about Samuel Coleridge Taylor. To the to the Black to my auntie, to the Black folks who have no connection to our world, what would you tell them about this Black man from England named Samuel Coleridge Taylor?
Well, right. I mean, it firstly goes to show that we everywhere. we are, have been, always will be everywhere. And so, this idea that borders should be closed off is preposterous, and it makes no sense at all. If borders should have been closed off, then borders, the same should have applied when the colonizers were going onto the continent of Africa. What about those borders that weren't closed? Just over 100 years ago. Not that long ago. So, etc. We can go there, but we won't. But right, our experiences as Black people run the gamut of the globe, and we are everywhere. And so, right, I think, Auntie, right, my mom, that who is very learned woman, but yeah, does she know about Samuel Coleridge? No. So I think it is we are employed. It implores us. Whew, words. The onus is on us as the translators of this music to talk about who this person was, to give some connectivity from his life to what the music sounds like, to how then we are interpreting it. I am so appreciative of our people coming out to see us, the support that Imani Winds has had, that Gateways has had, that folks literally come out to see and to get an experience. It's why the Gateways being on the stage of Carnegie Hall now 2 years running has been such a powerful experience, because of this idea that representation matters. It just does. It absolutely does. So like just the visual part of it, just the visual experience that that a person in the audience is having by seeing Black people play these traditionally white quote unquote instruments, or European instruments, I guess is the better way to say it. I think is phenomenal. I mean, I can only just imagine the feeling of pride, the feeling of recognition that so many concert goers have. And so to connect them so that's the baseline, that's the baseline. And then there's this idea of connecting the composers and what their stories are, and where they are coming from and why they wrote these pieces. And so yeah, we are, it empowers these listeners who have come out to see us do this thing that is rather remarkable. It just gives a second layer, I think, another layer of empowerment to the audience, who have invested so much into this experience that we are giving them, to talk about these musicians. I mean, I'm not, particularly Samuel Coleridge Taylor, like his whole story. Again, like you said, being a Black Brit, like he has his own story. So I think people find that quite interesting, and it actually informs how the music will be received. It can inform how we're going to play it, and then also how it will be received by the listener. So we've talked Imani Winds to this day, whatever stage we're on, we talk about the music that we're going to play. We talk about the composer. We talk about their story. What brought them to this piece? What brought us to this piece? We try not to give a dissertation because it's a lot, but that has really over the years has proven to be one of our hallmarks. Just speaking from the stage, by the way, hearing the voice of the musician is something that I think is, not hearing the voice of the musician is a very Eurocentric thing. Like to just have you sit, you play, you were done, right? But that's not our culture. Our culture is a communicative one, is an oral tradition for a reason. We want to share with you, whoever came, whether you Black, brown, white, green, you've come to see this music and see us perform it. But we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna have it. We're gonna make a connection. That we, what we gonna do is this. Yeah. And I think that's a part of the Black experience as well. Again, this oral connection, and so continuing that into the classical stage, into the concert stage, makes a lot of sense, to empower those that have come out to share this experience with us.
Well, I definitely want to encourage everyone listening to really, do some work and research around Samuel Coleridge Taylor. Back in December, my partner and I, we went over to London and we visited. We were staying in Brixton. I do my research. I want to be in the black part of London, whatever that is.
Yes.
We
Yes.
went to this museum, the London Black Archives, and the
Mm.
main thing was about Samuel Coleridge Taylor. So
Oh,
over
no
there
kidding.
on the other side of the pond, my sense is that what I could see is that he's noted not only as a significant composer of history, but a noted person overall, a noted black person from England.
Yeah.
So I definitely just want to highlight the importance of this story again of black people in the late 19th, early 20th century writing this music that so many people have associated with whiteness when, as you
Yes.
say, we everywhere and we do it
Yes.
all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's incredible, and it's good to hear that they are acknowledging their own native son. That
Exactly.
it's that is we need the acknowledgement from all fronts. So that's incredible that's happening there in London.
What's coming up for you beyond Gateways?
Well, Imani Winds, yeah, we're going strong. And as you mentioned, we've got people have changed coming to the new sorry. As we've talked about, there is a new member, Makai Gladden, and we are just welcoming them and so excited to have just this new energy. Curtis grad. So we've got plenty of concerts coming up, but then having Makai in the mix now is a really cool, exciting aspect. So we will continue to do our concert tours, and hopefully we have a new album coming out next year. We have to finish up some recording at the end of this year. So come the spring, fingers crossed, we'll see. But our foundation is going really strong as well. So the Imani Winds Foundation is, it's not new at this point, but in the scheme of the almost 30 years that we've been in existence, it's new-ish, meaning that we've been around, we've had the foundation now for about 6, going on 7 years. And that's really changed the game. It embodies the things that we've always been doing. So we have been commissioning composers of color and marginalized from marginalized communities. We've had a festival, now you know about that very well, but it's 15th year where we bring students from all over the country to study with us here in New York. We have outreach programming and residencies that we do that need support. We're going into prisons, we're going into schools, like we're really thinking larger about what kind of impact we can have. And so we were doing these things anyway, but our foundation has allowed for it to just be funded better, frankly, because we can apply to certain grants and really get more support, but also just kind of house these ideas more and more concise. So we're just constantly working at the Imani Winds Foundation and grateful, so very grateful for individuals who have supported us and government entities that have supported us. So that's really exciting because we can think bigger, frankly. We can think bigger than we had before. And one of those things that we did was creating our own record label, the Imani Winds Media, which released we have 100% success rate because we released one record and it got a Grammy. So we're like, so we just got to do it again. That's the goal. So yeah, there's always a lot of irons in the fire. We are commissioning Stuart Goodyear, who has had a lot of experience with the Gateways Festival as well. We've got a project coming up with him in 26, 27. So really just next season. He will be writing a quintet as well as a sextet for us. So we're establishing a collaborative program on the performing side as well as the commissioning side. And so we're excited about him. He's, a tremendous pianist, of course, but his compositions are really remarkable and very intricate and, just so dense, beautifully so. We're thinking about the world that we live in, trying to program pieces and projects around that to be cognizant of this kind of insane place that we are existing in these days.
Oh yeah.
but we're also staying the course. You know, we've been through worse. We'll be into worse as well. You know, we've come from adversities. There will be more in the future. So what are we supposed to do? Stay the course, do the work, continue on the platforms and positions that we are doing. Don't have the naysayers and talking heads disrupt the mission and the work that we feel is important. And that's what we're doing. You know, that's what we're going for. And so for me to be a part of Gateways in the capacity that I am in as an individual, but also just to represent Imani Winds by association is an honor. It's so much fun. I'm so proud of all the things that the organization has done, and I'm super excited to be a part of the upcoming fall festival.
Incredible. Well, I saved my hard question for last. So,
Uh-oh.
you're the last woman standing as far as the original members of Imani Wind. So I'm sure you can understand that in 40, 50, 70 years, when you finally sit back, there are many bassoonists waiting in the wings. What would you say the next bassoonist of Imani Winds needs to bring to the table to uphold the legacy that you and your colleagues have built?
Whew, that's a tough one because yeah, I do hope I got another 30 years in me. So yes, just thinking about not being in the group is the furthest thing from my mind. But what does the next students, if you mind, was authenticity, boldness, um, your own voice, having whatever your voice is, bringing that to the table. Certainly musical and technical excellence, a healthy dose of sense of humor because we laugh a lot all the time. We've got a fairly epic text loop going on, so be prepared for for that to occur, because that kind of magic off stage is what informs what you see on stage. The camaraderie, the fellowship, the love that we have for one another is definitely the stuff that happens behind the scenes that then is reflected on the chemistry. That's all reflected when you get on stage. And so, being vulnerable, but being powerful, being funny, but also knowing that this is serious business and we come to slay. Whomever, all the folks that have come on board since the originals do have that notion, and I think someone to fill the bassoon chair would have to have that same notion. And I it might come when I'm ready to step down, but no time soon.
Another look back into the ever-growing catalog of Imani Winds performances. That one's their take on Mongo Santamaria's Afro Blue, featuring Monica alongside the then founding members of Imani Winds. I've had the pleasure of including that in a number of my radio programs and things that I do live, so always a recording that I enjoy sharing again and again. Huge thanks to Monica for taking the time to chat with me, and if you're able to get up to Rochester, New York this week, definitely check her out at this year's Gateways Music Festival. More information on that and her in the description of this opus. All right, so it's TRILLOQUY time, and I have to talk about what the past few months have looked like for me. So before I took a bit of a break from TRILLOQUY, I think I did announce that I was taking on a new role with the American Composers Forum, not to be confused with the American Composers Orchestra, where I previously worked. The idea was for this to be a shared leadership model with me working with the then CEO of ACF in my executive director role, but in June, she let me know that she was moving on. It was quite a shock because I didn't really see myself as being qualified or really prepared in any way to run a multi-million dollar organization on my own. But as many people have been telling me, you're never really ready. You just have to jump in. So I've jumped in and have been swimming hard, sometimes floundering a little bit, but doing my best, looking at budgets, facilitating endowment draws, getting all of my board of director work done, all of this while leading programming conversations has been the challenge of my life, I have to say. But what's really mystic about this is that it perfectly aligns with the truest version of myself and my engagement with so-called classical music, at least as someone who is working and employed. I think I often tell people that I don't have an aspiration to labor, but as long as I live in a world where labor is required, this really feels like the best fit so far that I've ever had the opportunity and privilege to engage. Now that I am, I guess I'll say at my previous job at the American Composers Orchestra, I was able to support living composers, which I really appreciated and found to be a part of my life's mission. But it was in a way that I felt codified orchestral structures. As a bodhisattva, I don't want anyone to be out of a job. So burning down all orchestra halls is not necessarily a part of of what I believe in these days. But as I've expounded for many, many hours here on this show over the years, so much of what orchestras do is status quo pretending to be radical. And I was always doing the balancing act of doing what I felt was pushing us into a very progressive direction in this so-called classical industry while playing by the rules that keep the traditions alive and well. So now that I'm leading an organization that has set a precedent for not centering orchestras and any type of status quo, I'm thrilled to really see how I can push when it comes to this idea of decolonizing classical music. And the first multi-year initiative that I get to lead, I think, speaks to that directly. So for this season and the next few, I imagine, I've kicked off a program called Recomposing America, which, of course, is aligned with the 250th anniversary of the United States that's coming up in July of 2026. While there are some orchestral commissions mixed into Recomposing America, it's not anything typical and anything status quo. So the orchestra that I'm working with this season is the New York-based ensemble Protestra, which has never shied away from making statements about our socioeconomic political reality. Huge shout out to Michelle and everyone over at Protestra. I also have some chamber music coming down the pipeline, but again, chamber music that is outside of this colonial thinking around that genre of so-called classical music. This is happening through ACF support of the Sugar Hill Salon here in New York. Shout out to Alex and all the folks over at Sugar Hill Salon. And the activation is going down at Harlem's Africa Center, which will integrate the Afro-American identity and history with the broader diasporic conversation that they push forward at that institution. So I'm really, really thrilled about that. There are also some activities that I have planned to take place in Minnesota, as ACF is a Minnesota-based organization. I will be staying in New York. I feel like I need to say that a lot. But as far as Minnesota-based activations in my new role at the American Composers Forum, I have a jazz commission coming up in partnership with Walker West Academy, which, if you know, Walker West is in the historically Black area of St. Paul. Shout out to everyone in the Rondo community. So really happy to get some activations going there. And I even have a hip hop EP coming up that I've commissioned that ties in my view of classical music as it relates to American history and our diasporic identities. And then in between everything that I just mentioned, there are a number of other commissions. Shout out to Queen Drea and the other folks who have stuff coming up this season. There's some discussion panels that have already taken place and more to come. I'm headed to Chicago later this week as I've been able to support support a new work for piano and orchestra that's going to be performed by the Chicago Philharmonic, as well as the regional premiere of Damian Jeter's African American Requiem. And there are a number of other activations that I hope will really challenge what people are thinking about as we approach this quote unquote American anniversary and use this phrase classical music. All in all, I'm really, really excited, but there's so much that has to be managed behind the scenes for all of this work to get done, which again is why I've been so absent from TRILLOQUY for so long. I do plan to get my backlog of interviews cleared very soon, as I mentioned before the interview. So I appreciate your patience, but if there's anything Trill that I can offer regarding leading this organization or maybe even any arts organization, is that it's really tough. One of the big challenges that I'm facing is people thinking that I have the keys to this giant piggy bank and and I'm not giving out the funding that I can give. Well, I will be, completely transparent. ACF does have a multi-million-dollar endowment that I have to manage, but a lot of that funding is restricted. Most of it, I would say, I'll probably say about 90% of it is restricted. On top of the fact that I have to continue to raise money to pay the staff, make sure, our office rent is paid, if the lights stay on, all of the artists get their money, our websites stay active online. I'm always recruiting new board members to help me fundraise. It's a lot. I'm not sleeping as much as I would like. And I always feel very behind on something, especially my emails. But, at the end of the day, that's just what I'm here to do. I hope that you don't hear me complaining or disparaging my life. I'm very, very excited about what is to come, but these are some heavy weights that I'm lifting, heavier than I've ever had to lift in my entire life. Back in my days as a full-time musician, I used to feel guilty calling orchestra rehearsals work because I used to go to work, and I've had some jobby jobs that felt like work. On top of the fact that I knew, when I was a full-time musician, that there were a lot of people really putting it in and day out just to make ends meet. Now, this isn't me saying that I don't think musicians put in hard work, because they do. This is simply me saying that until you've had to run a full-fledged organization, you really don't know, because I didn't know how heavy of a lift this would be. But as I said, I'm lifting, and I'm lifting with a smile. If I wasn't a Buddhist, I probably would have run away from this challenge already. But as we learn in my practice, the greater the challenge, the greater the benefit. I think I'm going to cut it there this time, because I have a lot to get to today, but I look forward to sharing more with you in these coming days and weeks and giving y'all insight into the evolution of our collective fight for really dismantling the norms around what we call classical music, and that being an example of how this sort of work can happen across all sectors of our society for the common good of all people. We're all doing this in different ways. It takes many people to row a boat, to manage a kitchen. What other metaphors can I think of? That it takes a diverse set of tactics to really make all of this work. So I am honored to be in a position to really lead a full organization doing this work, and to support all of the groups and individuals doing it in their own ways. The work isn't always sexy, but you know what? It's important. Really appreciate y'all listening to this opus, and thanks in advance for your continued support as I catch up on my backlog of interviews. Nam myoho renge kyo, always, but until soon, peace.